Yeah, should be a busy week. Next week's a crazy week. And then, you know, class on Tuesday, Thursday night. It's gonna be jam-packed. Yeah, that's why I'll be there.
Okay. I thought you said Tuesday, and I'm like, no, I skipped.
Oh, I got the wrong day.
I was like, no, I
Yeah, I don't know. Make sure. Yeah. Oh, I'm on Thursday. Oh, that's the 12th. That's yesterday. Yeah, check Pulse. St. Paul River Center. Yeah, it'll be fun. What time is it? I don't know where to look at clock anymore.
Yeah. We'll have to put one back there too.
I got a whiteboard now, you guys. I like whiteboards.
Ooh, you could draw on it and make it a student. I mean, we should put a square up there so you can know where to write in.
They can see it online?
Yeah, they got the camera on.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, if I read it on this board. I was talking like using the whole thing.
Go back.
Other than there a lot.
Yeah. I'm gonna start over there, finish over there, and then there's one back there.
Go back.
Oh, who's that guy? We just let anybody in here? Wow. Okay, I remember him. He's okay. I like it set up this way a lot better.
Do you?
Yeah, because I can see
Mm-hmm.
people.
Yeah, it's weird that they put the screen over there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna switch it. Oops, that's easy. Rotate the projector.
She didn't want to give up her weekend
Like
like that. I said, you know, unless it's like holiday or something like that, you ain't gonna do that. She said, well, just
No,
ask.
these black out too.
But, you know the answer before I ask, right?
So this is the, I don't know what they call it on that little control thing over there, but I'm talking?
No, I thought I heard something else. I thought it was.
You heard somebody talking
Somebody outside.
outside?
Oh, maybe.
Hey,
Oh, it's her fault.
we should hook up after the class and on that thing I'm supposed to fill out.
Okay.
Because I didn't know idea what I was, I just briefly looked at it. Somebody puts their stuff in the trunk, showing no respect to the CISSP materials. Well,
Or they value it so much.
those should sit in the front seat with the seatbelt on.
You don't want to see the crayon marks somewhere.
Who's here? You were here. Our pen testers
Oh, yeah.
came back from working today, and they have a racing drone. You know, you put the goggles on, and you can see the camera on the drone, and they were racing it around, and he forgot to put the antenna on his thing, and so he was losing signal. And so he lost signal, and it went up on the roof.
Yeah, he hit the kill switch because he lost signal. He couldn't see. He just hit disengage. We're like, where'd it go?
Ended up on the roof. So I had to back my truck up to the door over here. They had a ladder. I got a picture of it. You never know when you might need pictures like this.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it, but that's
Yeah.
them climbing up the ladder
Yeah.
to go get the drone.
Yeah, where's the OSHA?
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, because Kevin is our kind of like our,
Or your insurance agent.
he's our policeman
So
around
you-
here. And so Kevin was leaving the office when we were getting up on the roof, and he's,
He comes out and goes, I can hear you guys walking on the roof.
yeah.
I can hear you, I'm leaving. So
Yeah, pretty much.
I wonder if the roof was, if we could get the go-karts up there and we can just put the track up there. Because he won't let us race them in the parking lot. Race them on the roof. That'd be awesome.
Totally.
Wasn't
Just
it?
rent a crane.
No, I feel that would be worse.
I was
You have to make a banked track.
oh, yeah, multi-level.
Like some sort of a.
It's time. Have you seen the? Have you been to Orlando? The what's that main like entertainment kind of strip there in Orlando? Like the
Oh,
Buffalo
yeah.
Wild Wings, and
Yeah.
right across the street from the Buffalo Wild Wings is that go-kart
Oh.
track that's like 3 levels.
Yes.
You seen that?
Yes.
You spiral
I've
up
tried
and
that.
then you guys haven't seen that? They have 2 tracks right there.
I never seen.
Huh?
Yeah, I know you're trying to.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. If you go to Orlando, look at that place. They also have one of those slingshot things that shoot you up and then you bring you back.
I'm good. With
Yeah.
Not doing that one.
So, but it's always lit up at night. So if you want to know where that place is, it's that place that's shooting people up and down.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So, okay. So what I decided to do, because we didn't get through the 198 slides, which surprise, right? Is I just took the second half of this class, that class, and put it into this class. So we are going to get through still 80-ish slides tonight, but we'll have some time. I got some things to show you. I got some fire extinguishers to show you and some lockpicking stuff to show you. It's kind of fun. This is like really, who did the number of seats? It's like the perfect number of seats.
Yeah, I took this one. It was on the back, so I took this one so I could.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it worked out really well. I like
You know
this.
who we're missing? Sherry. Mary Sherry Ziebel?
She
Well,
went
no,
to Vegas, and she-
Oh, she's Vegas. That's right. I forgot. I thought we lost her.
Vegas is more important than.
'Cause she's taken this class before.
Oh, has she?
She didn't take the test, so if she's doing the half again, we'll have to get on her. All right. This is different too. All right. So, 179 slides, ambitious. So I cut it down. We split it up, right? So we might run one class over. So 13 was the original number. Might go to 14, but whatever. We'll get through the content. Last Tuesday, what were people feeling after that? Overwhelmed? Did you get it? Do you think? Okay. Okay, because that a lot of that material is stuff that's going to be on the exam. The encryption is going to be hit pretty hard. So read up on that, memorize that. What's on the slides is basically a lot of the material you need to memorize. There's not much additional in that domain or in this domain related to cryptography that you need to worry about. But it is Thursday. We've all had this is the 4th day of the week, so I don't know if you guys are running out of gas. Just getting going. So get your coffee, energy drink. Let's stay awake. Let's get through this. It'll be fun. This is the things that we talked about last week, or Tuesday. It's like only 2 days ago. Virtualization, distributed computing. We talked about those. Some of the system vulnerabilities, threats, countermeasures. You know what the difference is between a vulnerability, a threat, and a countermeasure is, right? A vulnerability is just a weakness in the system. Where there's a weakness in the system, is there an applicable threat? If there is, then there's a risk, right? That's kind of how the whole thing plays out. Cornerstone cryptography concepts, we talked about that. The history of cryptography, which is like super cool. I highly recommend somebody buy one of those movies this weekend or rent it and watch it. It's really neat stuff. History, types of cryptography, we talked about asymmetric, symmetric, and hashing algorithms, right? And how, the different algorithms, how they work, what the differences are, and some cryptographic attacks, right? Today, we're going to talk about implementing cryptography. We've still got a little bit left to do. We'll start with IPSec. IPSec, we're going to talk about IP version 4 and IP version 6. And we're there's some good segue stuff here into the next domain, the communications domain, where it's going to get technical. Perimeter defenses. So this is all physical security stuff. That's why it's a different color. Perimeter defenses, site selection, design, and configuration. There's things that'll be, so I had a little bit of liberty, being that I've kind of split out these classes a little bit. So there's going to be some things that we'll cover that aren't in the book, that may not be testable, but I think they're really important when you're actually doing physical security assessments. System defenses and environmental controls. A lot of testable stuff in this one too, certainly around fire suppression and detection. You know, we talked about the ABCDK. We're going to go over that again. That's all really, really testable. So we'll start with IPSec. IPSec, short for IP security. Really, this is used for two different things. I would use IPSec to provide confidentiality, usually in like establish an IPSec tunnel, running in tunnel mode. Or I would use it to provide authentication of the packet, the integrity of the packet itself, almost like a digital signature. So suite of protocols. It's not, IPSec itself is not a protocol, it's a protocol suite. IP version 4 itself is not a protocol, it's also a protocol suite. Same with IP version 6. This will make a lot more sense when we get into next Tuesday, when we start getting into you know, telecommunications and communications stuff. If you're not technical, when we, you know, Tuesday is going to be a struggle. If you have a networking background, I grew up in networking, so it's an easy domain for me. But for those who haven't, that's okay. Fight through it. A lot of memorization is all it means. So IP version 4 is the sort of the original version of IP, the IP protocol suite, right? So TCP/IP, TCP/IP, UDP, HTTP, SMTP, on and on and on. Those protocols are part of the IP version 4 protocol suite. IP version 6 protocol suite is the newer. It's not new anymore. It's just really, really slow in implementation of that. IP version 6 was developed to primarily because we're running out of IP version 4 addresses, but that's all going to come next on Tuesday too. IPSec is a protocol within that suite, right? And its purpose is to provide maybe virtual private networks. So we do VPNs. The traditional way to do VPNs was client VPN. So I'd have client software running on my system. I'd establish a VPN connection with something, like Cisco's AnyConnect is a VPN client, and I can use that to connect and create an IPSec tunnel. So that's a virtual private network. Two primary protocols, two protocols and two modes. That's what you need to remember for IPSec. The two protocols are authentication header, and that's pretty, the name is descriptive. It provides authentication. It doesn't do anything around confidentiality. It doesn't encrypt the data, right? So that's one. The other is encapsulating security payload. That one does encrypt data. We don't need to get into the real deep technical details of these two protocols, but know what the difference is, right? Authentication header and encapsulating security payload. Two different, sometimes overlapping functionality. I can use them together. You can do that. Other protocols in the protocol suite, Internet Security Association Key Management Protocol. We call it ISACAMP, usually, ISACAMP, something like that. And Internet Key Exchange, which we call IKE. Okay, so far so good. This is an example of a packet. It might be harder for you to see in the back of the room, but you can see the difference on where. So that first one is the original IP data packet, right? I've got the IP header, I've got TCP, and then I've got data, and then there's checksum stuff and whatever. But essentially, that's my IP packet. You can see that the authentication header adds its own header, but it adds it behind the IP header. So it's not creating a tunnel at all. In order to create a tunnel, I have to replace that IP header. And that'll, when I talk about the modes, that's coming up soon. So authentication header, but it doesn't encrypt the data at all. Authentication header just provides like authentication for the packet itself. Whereas encapsulating security payload encrypts that data, adds its own header, adds its own trailer. Totally different. Any questions on that? Okay.
ESP adds its own authentication. When is it not overlapping with the authentication header protocol?
I can use them together. Those are not being used together.
Okay.
Yep. So in this configuration, the encapsulating security payload is not doing anything with an authentication header.
Okay.
Important things to remember about authentication header and encapsulating security payload is encapsulating security payload encrypts the data, authentication header does not. Keep those two straight, you'll be okay for the test. It's really important. Security association and ISA camp. So security associations are simplex, which means they're one way. Duplex is two ways. So that means that every connection that gets established is going to be a one-way connection, right? Every negotiation is going to be a one-way negotiation. So it's a simplex connection used to negotiate. So the security association itself will negotiate the parameters for which we're going to use encryption here. What protocols are we going to use? What strength, what key strength, all that stuff. And usually it starts with the strongest one first, and then it comes to the highest common denominator between the two that want to communicate. Does that make sense? So if one is AES, you know, its highest is AES, and the other one, its highest is triple DES, it'll default down to the triple DES, assuming that other one does triple DES too. Does that make sense? Okay. But it's used to negotiate those parameters. So if two systems want to communicate with ESP, they use two SAs, one for each direction. They use authentication header. In addition to ESP, so if I'm going to use those two in combination, there'd be two more simplex negotiations and connections that need to take place for a total of 4. Each simplex SA connection is identified by a unique 32-bit number called the security parameter index. We're going to get to know bits pretty well when we get into IP addressing. That's a 32-bit IP address. That's how big it is. We'll get deeper into that, but important thing to remember is the SPI, the security parameter index, is the one that gets assigned to each connection, right? And that's so we, on two systems or multiple systems, we can keep the connections, you know, organized and separate. The SA process, so negotiation is done by ISA camp. It's pretty basic stuff. We can get into IPSec a lot more, but this is good for now. So there's the two modes, tunnel mode and transport mode. The important things to remember about tunnel mode, that's your kind of traditional client to firewall or VPN concentrator, whatever you're using to terminate the VPN on the other side. That's your typical, you know, to keep data confidential, it's tunnel mode, right? Or point-to-point VPNs, where I've got maybe two firewalls that are VPN'd with each other. That's tunnel mode. Transport mode is used when two systems, they say speak IPSec natively, right? So they just talk this way. IP version 6 enables that more. So IPSec is an addition to, it's an improvement on IP version 4. It's not part of its original specification. Whereas IP version 6, it's built in. IPSec is built into IP version 6. That's the trouble with IP version 4, and the reason why we have a lot of struggles with, you know, securing things on the internet is if something doesn't have security built. I might have mentioned this before on kernels. If security is not built in at the core, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to secure it anywhere else, right, or everywhere else. And IP version 4 was never built for security. It was built for resilience. So, you know, IP version 4 will always be sort of insecure, whereas security is built in IP version 6. So tunnel mode, transport mode, the important difference to remember, tunnel mode is usually a client to a concentrator or a point-to-point connection, whereas transport mode is for two systems that just speak this, you know, natively. You can see IKE, the Internet Key Exchange, used to negotiate those sessions with each other. Whether it be triple DES, AES, whatever algorithm is going to be the highest is usually what gets negotiated for the encryption of the connection.
Make sure you know IPSec, all the parts.
Yeah, know these parts. You know, memorize these. And then there's packets over there. You can see in tunnel mode. See tunnel mode, I got a new IP header. You always have a new IP header when you're in tunnel mode, right? Because that's actually creating the tunnel. And that'll make more sense in Tuesday too. Any questions on any of that stuff? SSL, TLS, we'll talk about this a little bit. So SSL, TLS, used for encrypting data, usually between a client and a server. TLS is the replacement for SSL. There's been a lot of things over the last few years on, TLS versions. You don't need to know all that stuff for the exam. If you're interested in it, you can certainly read about it. This is a good description of how the connection starts. So the connection starts encrypted. So if I contact a server, even if I contact it on HTTP, what usually happens is if it's forcing HTTPS, it'll be a redirect to HTTPS. It'll force me to use HTTPS. That's kind of where everybody's going right now. So essentially, I will get the server's public key, right? If I trust the certificate. We talked about certificates and what those are last week. So if I trust the certificate, one of the things that comes with that certificate is the public-private key pair. The server keeps the private key. So I'll use the public key as the client to encrypt my data to you so we can negotiate the session, right? What we're going to do is we're going to exchange a session key. I encrypt it with the public key. Only you can decrypt it with the private key, right? And then you'll send me something with your private key, and we'll negotiate that session key, which is a symmetric key, right? So we're using asymmetric encryption with SSL and TLS to exchange session keys, and then we'll continue our communications over using those session keys if it's faster. But that's all happening under TLS and SSL or SSL. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe we'll get to this on the next slide or whatever, but they just work the same way. I mean, this big paragraph I've been reading doesn't say whether it's SSL or TLS, but it sounds like
they're sort of used interchangeably. I mean, they have been for years. And even if you research, I mean, they're fairly similar. So I wouldn't get too caught up in the details of the difference between SSL and TLS at this point. TLS was built to be a replacement for SSL, so it had to be backwards compatible. Otherwise, I start using TLS and now it doesn't work with anything.
Is it SSL pretty much dead at this point?
It is dead. Yep, SSL is dead. Yep. Yeah. PGP, no PGP, this isn't the PGP that you see today. This is not really used all that much anymore, but this is PGP encryption and not the PGP encryption like you see the full disk encryption stuff anymore. This was an asymmetric encryption algorithm. And the way PGP worked, instead of using certificates to validate the identity of a system, I would use a web of trust. So I trust you, and I trust you. So you trust him because I trust him. It was just a web of trust. That's how it was built. Phil Zimmerman, 1991. Like I said, it's not much used anymore. Things to remember about PGP: an asymmetric encryption algorithm uses the web of trust and not PKI. Right. S-MIME, don't need to know a lot about S-MIME either, other than the fact that this is a way to use PKI, so public key encryption, to encrypt email messages that are encoded with a multi-purpose internet mail exchange encoding algorithm. That's basically all you need to know. It's for encrypted email. Escrowed encryption. This is always controversial. So escrowed encryption works by, I have a private key potentially, or I have, and you can use this private key sensor as a public private key pair, or you could use it more commonly in like a symmetric encryption. So I would take, you'd have half of the key, you'd have half the key, and I'd have the whole key. And so that's the escrow. And given certain conditions, either contractual, legal, a judge could say, you need to release your part of the key from escrow, you need to release your part of the key from escrow so that we can decrypt that data, right? That's probably more common. And you might see this in, I don't know, in dealing with some government contracts or something, they might require escrowed encryption. I've never actually had to escrow encryption before.
Software.
The software escrow is big, right? I wouldn't contract to have somebody develop large amounts of software without software escrow. But we'll get to that later on.
Sorry.
Too. No, that's true, right? But this is, you see what I'm saying? We escrow it. You got part, something has to happen for you to release your parts and then decrypt my data. Because the one thing the government doesn't like is not being able to snoop on you. You've seen that, right? We're trying to break into iPhones and everything else they don't like. And then, you know, whatever. It's weighing this balance between terrorists and, you know, bad things happening in the world versus, you know, no privacy, right? So one of the things that got them in trouble back in '93 was Clipper chip. So Clipper chip was used essentially as the government had all the keys, you know, to decrypt your data. So use the escrow encryption standard. People did get really ticked off about it back then. I was only new to security, so I don't even remember living through any of this stuff. But created a media firestorm, abandoned in '96, so it didn't last very long. 80-bit key, skipjack was the algorithm. So if you know Clipper chip, what it was sort of used for, the skipjack algorithm, an 80-bit key, that's good for the test. So we even had those problems, you know, back then. We still live with them today. That was another reason too for the original, you know, COCOM agreement, and less so Wassenaar. But you remember, COCOM was to prevent the exportation of encryption stuff or technology, which applied to encryption. But the reason why is they didn't want, like, Russia having, you know, access to the same levels of encryption that we do, because, you know, whatever. Government doesn't trust anybody, but you trust them. Damn it. So steganography. Steganography isn't encryption at all. It's meant to hide that a communication is even taking place. So in encryption, when I encrypt data, you know that we're communicating. You just can't read any of it. In steganography, we hide the fact that we're communicating at all. You can use these two in combination. You know, I could encrypt messages and then put them, you know, and then use steganography to hide that we're communicating. A lot of times I think that's probably overkill. That's a really cool story about Herodotus, whatever her name is, or his name, Herodotus. They would shave your head, write the message or tattoo the message on your head, wait for your hair to grow, and then send you on your way. That would take a long time for me to say.
That's some dedication.
Right? It's like you shave, you know, it's like, oh, hey, the messenger got here. You shave their head. Hi. Crap. It took like 6 months. But anyway, so a lot of times you can hide it. So you can hide, and there are programs, you know, freely available programs to do this yourself if you like playing with that stuff.
You'll want to know how to identify an example of this.
Yeah. Like with steganography, you can hide it in pixels. You know, disperse your message across, you know, pixels enough to where you, with the visible eye, you can't tell that there's data in the picture. More often, it's hidden in files. Get the concept of steganography? Easy. Digital watermarks. So digital watermarks are used to protect, or actually, they're used usually to identify. In this case right here, the story, it was to identify who kept leaking movies, right, before the movies were released. And what they would do is they would watermark each of the movies that they were handing out to the screeners, and then because every frame of the picture had the watermark in it, right? And it may have been hidden or may not. And then so when one leaked, they checked the watermark. Oh, it came from this source, and they ended up busting the guy, Salvador Nunez. It was a crappy movie too, I think. Flushed Away.
I like that movie.
What is that movie? What's that movie about? Oh, so it was a good movie?
Yeah.
Rat movie and slugs.
I don't know. I can think of better movies to get busted for.
Yeah,
you see,
that's
but-
the one I didn't get busted for.
Right.
It's not worth it.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. It's not worth the risk.
It's not worth the
Your
risk.
risk assessment, not worth it.
Not worth it, right? Yeah, people just don't do enough risk assessments. But you see how the watermark works, right? I would tag something with some data that, you know, would prove the authenticity of that file or that data. So then if it went somewhere else, I could say who did it. It's the non-repudiation part. All right, that's it for encryption.
Real quick, you'll, again, with digital watermarks, know the difference between steganography and digital watermarks.
Yes, they are different. You can use them together. And
Right.
oftentimes they
But they'll
do.
give like a scenario and ask which one it is. And there's 4, and those will be 2 of the $4,
Right.
right? So you need to know the difference. They're similar, but they are different.
Yep, know the difference. Good. And like I said, he's the authority on what's on the test because he
Let's not
took
go that far.
I think more than I am.
Or more recent.
Right. Right. So physical security. Physical security is kind of fun. I do social engineering stuff. And so physical security is always cool because you look at buildings and you're like, okay, how would I get into here? You do a lot of surveillance. You do a lot of figuring out where the holes are. And oftentimes, I don't know if I just had a dust in my eye or something, but I saw something like, but physical security is cool. So as you study physical security, I don't know if you guys do this, but you'll start catching yourself looking at door locks now. Oh, what kind of door lock is that?
Cameras, so
You
you
know,
can step on
Or
printers.
all that stuff, which is a good sign. So a man trap is meant to restrict access. So you might be able to get into one level of access, but now you're stuck in this man trap because you have to authenticate out of the man trap to get to what you're trying to. You see this at data centers a lot. So I would maybe use my key card to get into the man trap. And if I want to go to the next thing, maybe I have to use hand geometry. That would be fairly common. So it's two, usually, it doesn't always have to be two, but it seems to make sense. If I use the badge to get into one, I use the badge to get into the other.
Scales in the man trap.
What?
They'll do scales in the man trap.
Yep, scales are really cool ones because then, I can tell by the weight that either you took something or that somebody's with you. So sometimes you'll see scales on the floor of man traps. Yep. So man traps, the important thing about a man trap is one door has to close before the other door opens, and usually you have two different factors. Have we gone over the factors of authentication? It's coming up then. So there's three factors to authentication. There's something I know, password, PIN, stuff like that. There's something I have, like a token, a key fob, a phone, something like that. And something I am. Right? Something I am would be a biometric. It could be iris scan, fingerprint, voice recognition, that would all be something I have. So one factor, meaning, and actually it'd still be two factor. Because sometimes people do dual single factor to make things, like sometimes people say, well, I use a password for this and then I have to use another password for that. Is that two factor? It's two single factors. Two-step maybe, yeah.
So didn't you say that there were potentially four, they're also using geography?
I don't think that's valid. There's some people that make that case, but I don't think it's valid. And for the test, it's not valid.
Not for the test.
I don't think it's valid because it's too easy to spoof that one. Yeah. The fourth one meaning, where you are. So man trap, so that's what I'm saying, two-factor authentication. It's one factor, the key card to get me into the first door, and then hand geometry, the something I am to get me into the next door. That would be an example of two-factor authentication. Ballard, so ballards, you use them to keep people who people that get confused on where the break is versus where you've seen those videos of people crashing through convenience stores. Ballard would have stopped that. Ballards are also used in front of government buildings and highly sensitive buildings to keep people from bombing them. So if you go down to downtown Minneapolis, the Federal Reserve building, they have big mounds of dirt. Those you can use, those wouldn't be Ballards per se, but they're meant for the same purpose.
Target the red balls up front.
Target the red balls up front. Yeah, exactly. Those are actually Ballards. Yeah. So Ballards, those are posts designed to stop vehicles from doing things. Smart card. So smart card, the important word there is smart. That means there's an integrated circuit on the card. The card actually has some thinking ability. That's what makes it smart. So all your credit cards that you're getting nowadays with the little chips, that chip makes it a smart card. It's an integrated circuit on that card. Your old cards, the old swipe cards, those are not smart cards. Tailgating. So tailgating is one of our favorite ways to get into facilities. Especially here in Minnesota, people are very just accommodating. It's nice here. People are nice. So one good way is you wait for employees to arrive and go to your back of your car, grab some boxes, and walk behind them, they'll always hold the door open for you. Who's going to close the door on somebody holding a bunch of boxes? That's a jerk move, right? And I've been called names before. Like I was downtown Minneapolis and I was coming out of a law firm, a big law firm downtown.
Best story.
Well, yeah, and I was coming out, you know, they have the controlled access on both the doors in the elevator lobby. There's people coming off the elevators while I'm coming out of the office. And so I closed the door behind me and the guy says, "Hey, thanks a lot, asshole." Like, right on, buddy. I mean, I'm not going to be the cause of the breach. That doesn't look good. But that would be an example of tailgating, right? Probably it was on video. Well, actually, no, it's a law firm. They don't like using videos.
Yeah.
So, so tailgating is a real easy way to get into facilities. It's hard. People just aren't, it doesn't come natural. Whereas like New York, I bet you if you use the same type of attack, I've never done it, but if you came with a bunch of boxes, they'd probably knock them out of your hands. Right? So you'd have to try a different strategy in New York for tailgating. So introduction, physical assets. So it goes right to our definition of information security, right? It's administrative controls, it's policies, procedures, training, and awareness. We've talked some about that. Physical controls and technical controls. It doesn't matter how good your firewall works. It doesn't matter what your antivirus does if somebody can come and steal your server, right? So physical controls can't be neglected. They do need to be thought of. With the exam and in real life too, I hope for most of us, human life always comes first. You'll see at least one question on the exam. I would assume maybe two, but definitely one.
I have multiple questions about that.
So multiple questions. So these are no-brainers, right? Anytime you see anywhere on the exam, human safety or something to do about that, that is the answer, right?
Yes.
So
yeah,
that's why it's in red. So physical security is keeping physical access, keeping people out of places or sometimes in places, but more likely out. Also protecting against on the availability side of things, right? Having disaster recovery plans. We're not going to talk disaster recovery plan today. That's coming too. But natural disasters play a big part. Crime rates play a big part. And physical location plays a big part in if we were in South Minneapolis, you would expect to see a lot different physical security controls than you do here, right? Or if you're right next door to a government building, right? Or a sheriff's office. Even though the sheriff's office gives us some protection, there's still, we know that bad actors might come around more. So that's a big play on how you design physical security. I always like to think of physical security too from layers. So from the outside in, the first layer of defense that I have on physical security is the neighborhood, the area in which I'm operating. And then you take it a step in. Maybe it's the parking lot, so look at the lights around the facility. Is there adequate lighting, not just for physical security, but safety purposes too, right? If people are leaving at night. And then you go to the building itself, right? And what physical security controls do I have on the building itself? How many doors, how many windows, what kinds of doors, what kinds of locks, what kinds of windows? Is there shrubbery that hides line of sight? For vehicles passing by, that's a great place for people to hide. You know what I mean? All those kinds of things. And then you just keep working in. So then once I get into the facility, what's to stop me from, getting into your server room, or getting into your records department? So there's those layers of security. That's the same way we're getting better at doing it from a physical standpoint. It's the same kind of concept when we talk defense in depth that has to be applied to networks. When you break into a network today, most places, and we'll cover this some more too, but it's a crunchy shell GUI center concept. So once I get through the crunchy shell, it's a GUI center. There's nothing to stop me from moving laterally in the network because that same design concept hasn't been followed, but you can understand it more in the physical security world. So perimeter defenses help prevent, detect, and correct. So you can't prevent all bad things from happening. So we need to be able to detect them and we should be able to correct them. So having those plans in place for all three of those. Unauthorized physical access. A lot of times what you'll find is like camera surveillance is more used as a corrective control than it is a detective control because nobody's sitting there watching it. Do you see the difference between, the same control can be used in different ways. If there were somebody sitting there watching it, like a guard, you have a guard desk and, you see the screen and they're sitting there watching the screen, then it might be a detective control. It's also usually a deterrent control because you're going to need to be able to put those things in the right places. You know, is this a detective control, is it corrective, preventative, whatever. Should employ defense in depth, fences, doors, walls, locks, etc. Fences, there are standards for fences. You don't need to know what the standards are for fences. You will need to know the different classes of gates, which are coming up. Gate, you know, class 1 gate is like the little gates that anybody can push through. Class 4 is like they use in prisons. So that's coming up. But fences are good deterrent controls. What we usually use fences for is to direct people into an area, right? It's not so much that you can't get over the fence. It's that you're probably going to just go into the area that we're directing you towards. That's usually what we use fences for. Steering people into a place. Gates, there's the gate standard. Actually, I got a little thing that pops up. That's a bad gate. It's a bad gate design. And there's the fence standard. If you're interested in the fence, you know, finding out more information about fence standards or whatever, if you're in a design world, then you can go there. Let's bring it back. So 4 classes, like I mentioned, of gates. You know, class 1, it's residential home use. It's not going to prevent anything. That truly is to get you to come, you know, to a specific area. All the way to class 4. Class 4 is airports, prisons. You know, those are some serious gates. So even look at like class 3 is loading dock for 18-wheeler trucks, right? It's that kind of. So that's a pretty hefty gate, you would think. It's not that it would stop it, but they use those kinds of gates there. Yeah. Any questions on gates? Gates are pretty.
Just remember,
Straightforward.
class is residential, commercial, industrial, restricted.
Yeah, remember those
If you
order.
can just remember that order, that's all you need to know.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's a bad one. There's lots of. I mean, who does that? It can't be real. Somebody photoshopped that. I don't know, man. I drive on the same road as some of those people, so maybe they do that. Bollards. So bollards are, so when we're looking at bollards, things that usually we protect bollards aren't just doors. Could be perimeter walls around electrical, what do they call that? The big green thing, the big green things, yeah. Yeah. The substations, but we would see it in loading docks, right? We'd see them around generators. You know, we don't want people running into our generators. So we use them in a number of places. Strong post designed to stop a car. We don't have any here. We have curbs here, but if I have one to show you, I would. Term derives from short, strong posts, mooring ballards. Convenience stores, secure facilities, plant cars. Large concrete planters can have the same effect. Your big orange balls at Target have this, or big red balls at Target. I've got a picture, I think, to show you on this one too. What's wrong with that?
You had to get it in there somehow.
This is an actual assessment too. I can't tell you where. I don't think you can see one. Actually, you see where Fuzzy did out up there? There was a water tower. So I was like, I gotta get that out of there. So otherwise, you guys would know where it is for sure. But is that going to protect against vehicle traffic?
Yellow car sits in.
Yeah.
Well, right. So the problems I have with this is the spacing is wrong, right? It can easily fit a vehicle in there and knock out power. 2, you got this icy area here with a vehicle sitting on it, and you've got this big ass propane tank sitting there, and there's no protection for that propane tank. So shouldn't there be some bollards there too? Especially like ice. I mean, this couldn't be more classic. Like, what the hell?
You're lucky it hasn't happened yet.
Well, yeah. I'm lucky it didn't happen while I was there. So yeah, this was, big recommendation that you do something with this. But you can see that bollards would protect that. If I had bollards properly placed, those are also, I don't know what, I'm not into knowing this tensile strength of steel and all that stuff, but those don't seem to be sufficiently sized, like a sufficient diameter for protection of anything either. So So lights are a good, certainly a good deterrent control because we know that bad guys don't like to be seen usually. They can also be used as a detective control if the bad guys are seen. But we like lots of lighting, typically around office buildings and data centers. So detective and deterrent control, we know the reason why. You will need to know light measurement, at least the basics here. So a lumen is how much light one candle creates. So it's not much. And then foot candles is how much of that within a square foot. And then lux is how much of that within a square meter, right? So a foot candle is how much light a candle gives off in a square foot, right? And lux is how much light a candle gives off within a square meter, right? So it's an intensity measurement. Fresnel, I don't know why it's still on the exam, but you've seen Fresnel lenses before. They're like the concentric circle things, lenses. They're very focused and very powerful, and the lens was usually used in like lighthouses. The ones that's a Fresnel lens. I don't know why it's still on the exam, but it's always,
I don't think I had any on that. But yeah, that was mentioned.
of all the different light types that you could talk about, right? We could talk about like LED lights are really big now because it's clean light. It's easier. You get more foot candles out of less power out of LEDs. I was down at last weekend. I was on Fort Benning, Georgia. It was on base, and they had changed everything out to LEDs. It was like daytime. At night, it was so cool. I mean, I just didn't realize how much that many lights puts out. But LED's not on the test. Should be. Closed circuit television. So things around closed circuit television, CCTV is used, primarily as a corrective control. It can also be a deterrent control, right? If it's deterring crime, if I put them in places where they're meant to be seen by people. It's also could be a detective control, depending on if I'm using it with somebody actually watching it to detect something bad happening. It's a detective device, not only a detective device, but it could be a detective device used in aid in detecting bad things happening, deterrent control, normal light spectrum acquire. So typical CCTVs like the analog CCT or CC cameras don't only see it daytime, so they're completely dependent on light for field of view. But we've got infrared ones too. Those are the ones that you see that usually have the dots around the outside of them, right? That's infrared. It's using heat to see in the dark. Tube cameras don't. Banks were kind of slow. A lot of banks were slow at upgrading a lot of their cameras over the years. It's only, I haven't seen one for a while, but only a few years ago, you'd see them kind of regularly in banks. They would still be using the old analog to VHS sitting in the break room on top of the microwave. It's like, and then they're all kept them in the same places too. It's like, can you guys like switch this up? What did you say?
I said it's that bad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are still pretty common as of a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Thankfully, they're being replaced if they haven't already. Your baby monitor, right? And you can go to like Costco and buy a box of like 12 cameras, a whole camera system for like $180. It's like, why wouldn't you just? I mean, those would be sufficient, right? I understand that people that know more about CCTV cameras, people that sell them would make the case on why you have to have this super expensive, and I'm sure there's value in it, but I just get a damn camera that works. So older cameras, charge couple discharge is the new ones. They're digital, so everything is stored. There's a bunch of different features for cameras. I mean, there's a whole laundry list. You don't need to know the whole laundry list of features with cameras. You need to know how they work. Mechanical irises, just like your eye, it gets smaller when it's lighter and gets bigger when it's darker, right? That's so it can take in more light, just like, your retina needs to do. Cameras work the same way. The iris, changes the size, the aperture. So you would think that and that also plays well with the how far I can see. It's the same concept as what happens with your eyes. Wide aperture, lower light conditions lowers the depth of field. I can't see quite as far because I have to take in more of the image. Pan and tilt. So pan, tilt, zoom is usually what, they usually come together. PTZ. So I can move it. Sometimes I have a little joystick. Sometimes they move automatically depending on, how they've been used and programmed. Fixed camera view. So the types of displays when you see like the guard station or whoever's watching cameras or wherever they're recording to. These are the different types of displays, just a fixed camera view and auto scan, so the picture changes as it goes from camera to camera. And then you've got multiplexing, which would be like 32 images, all have their own little space on the monitor. Those are the three standard types of displays. Magnetic tape, such as VHS, used to back up images from tube cameras. You're all old enough to know what VHS are, right? Even you are? Huh. Yeah, VHS. It's funny. I don't even know where you can get tapes anymore. But now new cameras, CCD. So the newer cameras are all using DVR and NVR. So it's all video. It's digital. It's all different between DVR and NVR. Traditionally, NVR is over the network. DVR is attached to a single station. But anyway. So that's not a good camera placement. It's not terrible other than the fact that you can reach around the door and unplug it. Put it in a place where you have to unplug it. That's not necessarily bad if you have to see me come to unplug it, right? You can't do everything to protect them, but that one's bad because you can just come around the door and get that one. That's, it's not doing anything. And if you see that, then they're not using the camera system either. That's VHS. I figured I'd include a picture for you who haven't seen a VHS before. Camera quality. So there's not much talk in the book of how important camera quality is. The camera quality is super important, right? What's the sense in having it if I can't identify, what's happening in the images? That's just an example of poor camera quality. Plus, it looks like we have 3 cameras maybe that are out, or maybe they're just, ones that haven't been installed yet. Yeah, I mean, I can't identify, anything. I've seen companies that a bad thing happened and they couldn't tell if it was a pickup truck or a Volkswagen Beetle. I mean, it was that bad. You can see the quality today, right? With this quality, because now that things are digital, that's analog. Now that things are digital, you can really get super high quality images, which is very important.
Yeah. A customer come in this dorm and they had a system from the 90s.
Yeah.
In the last 15 years, they were able to actually identify 2 people from all the fights in the halls because it was just so blurry. It was kind of saying, oh, okay, I guess they have 2 or something. They had the cameras, and unless you're within 5 feet of the camera, it was just black and white.
Like I said, go to Costco. Get yourself a 12-pack.
Yeah. Plus, it's slightly bigger.
Yeah.
It was a pretty big yeah.
Well, now you can buy cameras one-off, and a lot of them are compressing enough, still not compromising image quality, but compressing enough that wireless transmission and storing to the web.
They're PoE and they're smart at the camera. They only send back activity.
Right.
So they run all the time, but then record the micro SD locally and then just send back what's
exactly.
activity.
So yeah, you can see the difference, right? And so when you're doing an actual assessment or helping, an organization, ask to see the camera quality, it's not just having the camera isn't the point. The point is, can I actually use the cameras? And also, where am I storing those DVRs, or, where's the DVR, where's the NVR? Storing it, in a server room, in a rack, that's locked. It's better than, keeping it behind the, receptionist desk, stuff like that. But people don't often think of that for some reason. So physical security locks, pretty self-explanatory, right? We all see locks, we've all used locks. Preventative physical security control, not much of a deterrent control. but I suppose you can make a case for that. But preventative control for the purpose of the test. Used to open doors, windows, mechanical, such as key locks, or electronic. We don't like key locks because key locks, we lose accountability really quickly. You know, key locks, people can duplicate key locks, people share, or not key locks, they duplicate keys and they share keys. They lose keys. You know, if you really want it to be an effective control, every time you lost a key, you would rekey your system. Anytime you lost any accountability, or you just rekey them on a regular kind of basis, it's assuming that people are going to duplicate them and other stuff, right? That becomes a pain in the butt really quick. So they're not truly all that effective. Even though it says do not copy, right? You know that people don't follow rules, right? Do not copy. It's not like they can't make a copy. I don't have to go to Keysmith anymore, right? I can do it all. I can take a picture of it with my phone. So as an attacker, it's really easy to duplicate keys. So if you have a key sitting on the desk, you know, you just walk by and take a picture of it, right? And I can make a key. So it's, you know.
Is there an app for that?
Oh yeah, there's an app for that. Yeah. So keys aren't all that cool. Common type is the pin tumbler lock. 2 sets of pins, driver pins and key pins. The important thing about these locks is you need to get the pins aligned with the shear line, which then allows the turn, the plug. So these are, this is a lock pick, education set. So you can see, you know, the operation. These are the pins here. This is the shear line. You can sort of see the shear line. So as you're using, you know, we call this a rake. I don't know what they call it in the test. It was called a rake. We call it a pick. I call it a rake because usually you're raking across the pins to get them aligned. And then you're using this to turn the lock, right? So if you want to come look at them later or whatever, it might help, you know, to see how some of these different locks work. This one, like this one, right? You've got 4 sets of pins. This one is very hard to pick, right? Because you have to, and you'll have to get it in there. So that one takes a long time. But this one's kind of, you know, I think trivial. That one. So if you want to see it, you know, what a lockpick set looks like and how easy it is to bypass keys, that's pretty easy. So incorrect key results in misaligned pins, jamming the lock plug so the lock plug won't turn. You know, ways around that would be to pick the lock or to do what we call bumping. Bumping, all I need is a screwdriver, a pocket knife, right? And so it's to stick it in there and you bump it and turn at the same time. The point is the pins will jump and you want to catch them when they're coming down so that they're aligned with the shear line turns, right? That's a bump. I think maybe it's on the next slide, but so those are the 2 ways to defeat locks. All locks are pickable. All locks are bumpable. Not all, either pickable or bumpable, right? So you can bypass key locks. It takes a lot more skill. Like this one, I can't do. Whoops. Have you seen has Herman done that one for you?
I haven't seen him do this one.
Yeah, that's a hard one. So ward and warded locks. So warded locks are like the skeleton key ones, right? You see that they got all the, I've seen the skeleton key before. I don't have a skeleton key with me, but they actually fit in the slots, right, to turn. That's how it turns. Different than having the pins. Spring bolt lock, jam, so those are all doors, right? So there's a spring, right? And when the door closes, it pushes the spring in and then it gets into the jam and it pops out into, right? So spring bolt, locking mechanism, springs in and out of the door jam, those are fairly simple. Also very, very easy to get bypassed though. You need this side of anything. This pick might be a little too thick, but this is easy to slide through a credit card, easy to slide through the trim of the door and the locking mechanism to just pop it out of the locking mechanism and open the door. So easy office doors like this are, you know, a lot of them are keyed like that one over there. So it's just popping it in there. Do you know what I'm saying? We can, is Kevin's door locked?
Probably.
Okay, we should go, we'll do it. We'll go do his. We have to get into Kevin's office quite a bit because he's like our IT, and this isn't a good place to keep things locked up. So, okay, deadbolts, we've seen those rigid, right? They don't work. You can't get through them the same way. Yeah, anyway, they both extend into this, the door jamb through the strike plate. Yeah, so those are all pictures of that kind of stuff. Pretty simple stuff. So lock picking, opening a lock without a key, the art of opening a lock without a key. And it is an art, it takes a lot of practice. I'm not very good at it. We sent one of our analysts to Black Hat a couple years ago for a lock picking class where he just spent, I think, 2 straight days picking locks, and his hands were like this at the end of the 2 days. Because he had to go from one lock to the next lock to the next lock. So he started out easy, harder. And the objective was in those 2 days to get through all the locks. And so he was like, yeah, it was a good class, man. I'm like, what's wrong with your hands? Like, I can't move them. So a set of lock picks used to lift the pins. So you can see, and I call it a rake. They call it a pick here. And then that other piece is this one. You know, if you want to look at those. And like you were saying, some places it's illegal to have a lock pick set because they just, you know, it's
Tool of crime or something.
paraphernalia for crime or something like that.
Unless you're a licensed lock pick or piece of it or whatever.
Yeah. And so they say bumping the shaved down key physically fit into the lock. You don't even need to have a shaved down key. You can use a screwdriver. You know, you have to be very patient. It's not going to happen. It'll get frustrating too. So locks can be picked or bumped. The only question is how long it'll take. Master and core keys, these are keys. So one of the things we have a problem with keys is the accountability of keys and the fact that I can create duplicates. All those things are issues, even more so when you come to master keys and core keys. Master keys typically work on all locks or a big subset of locks. And the core keys, I can switch out cores with them. Once you pull the core out, because a lot of times you can you know, take one of these things, you know, something that can get in there and open the door with it. So core keys and master keys are really, really important to keep those tightly controlled. That's what they're used for. Questions? Easy. Combination locks. We've all seen combination locks. Brings you back to your high school days, right? Spinning the dial. I had to teach my 12-year-old daughter. No, she was 10 then, 11, whatever. When she first had it, we were there. Everybody else, it was like the first day, like parent-teacher conference thing. We like meet the teacher, and here's your locker, and you know whatever. And she could not get combination done. We were there when everybody else had already left. We're still working on it because I made her do it 3 times in a row correctly before we were going to leave. You know, because I don't want to get. It's really important. It looks embarrassing if you can't get into your locker. But yeah. So the specific numbers, usually in specific order. The one, you know, it's 3 to the right, 2 to the left, 1 to the right. Pop. That's the standard one. Weak form of physical access control, don't use in production environments such as data centers. Has anybody ever seen a data center locked with a combination lock, master lock? I actually haven't. All the things I've seen, I've never seen that. So don't do it. Button and keypad locks, numeric combination. So there's a door right outside this one that goes into this other room over here, which is a keypad lock. So if you want to see what one of those look like, button and keypad locks. Limited accountability due to shared combinations. People don't do that. But what? No. Button and keypad locks, vulnerable because prolonged use can cause wear. So it is, you know, if you haven't switched it out for a while or changed the combination on those locks, you can walk up to one and easily see. I may not know the order of the 4 digits that you used, but I can see that I can see what the 4 digits are. Right, and if it's a 4-digit number, then there's only, was that 10,000 different combinations? Is that right? 10,000, 4 digits, 99999, 10,000. So there's it's only 10,000, but if you already give me 4,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
now you've really brought that number of tries down. Plus, nowadays you've got apps for, have you seen those heat, infrared,
Watch somebody do it and go take a picture of it.
yeah, either take a picture of it or you can walk, just walk up to it after they're done.
Yeah, and it'll show them.
Because their finger, the heat is still,
Yeah.
signature is still on the buttons, and you can go get those. It's like $149. That's another way. Shoulder surfing is another way to get in. Walk and people don't notice stuff like that. So those are easy ways. That's why we don't like them. Combinations discovered through brute force attacks for every combination. Shoulder surfing, push button locks, limited combinations. They don't qualify as preventative devices. They're deterrent only. Yeah. Cool. Where I'd use them is definitely low security areas. Like that room is a low security area. You can go through the window if you want. Right. It's just a deterrent control, just to keep you out of there. It's not to steer you out of there, not to keep you out. So smart cards and magnetic stripe cards. These are pretty self-explanatory too. You can see the chip on there looks a lot like your credit cards nowadays. Those are smart cards. They have that integrated circuit on them. There's 2 types. There's contact and contactless. The kind that we're using whenever we go buy stuff is the contact one. That's why I have to shove it in the machine. But there are also contactless ones, which usually use like RFID or something for communication. Near field communications is another kind of NFC. The NFC won't be on the test, but RFID will. And the way they work is it uses the power. You get close enough to the system, it will power on the card and integrate and start the circuit. Or your card itself has a power source on it, so it has a battery in it, right? The reason why, so the contact ones, when you put it in there, it's actually charging the card, right? It actually powers the card when you put it into the card reader. That's the circuit piece. Does that make sense? So on the contactless ones that are smart cards, it's either being powered by the reader, in proximity, or there's a power source on the card itself, right? So that card would be a little thicker. So stripe cards, the reason why we went from stripe cards is because they're very, very, well, the other ones are can be duplicated too, but these ones are really easy to duplicate because that magnetic stripe, all that data, all I need is the data on the magnetic stripe to write it to another magnetic stripe. So that's why, the target breach was such a big deal, because they were stealing all the stripe data, the magnetic stripe data. So I could just go and get any cards. You can buy them in bulk. You can buy 10,000 magnetic stripe cards from a supplier, blanked ones for, I don't know, not much, maybe a couple $100. And then you can just write all that data, write the stripe data to the new cards and use them as credit cards, right? So that's why that's why they went, it's one of the reasons why they went away from stripe, swipe cards. So contact cards must be inserted into a card reader. Yes, contactless cards can be read wirelessly. That's how it's read wirelessly. One way is RFID. RFID tags are called transponders and transceivers. The transponder is the card, the transceiver is the thing on the door that you usually see. Magnetic stripe cards, you have to swipe it. It's a contact. It has to read the stripe. Passive devices, no circuits. Yeah. And we've gone, I'm still kind of surprised at how many major retailers still have swipe only. Right? SA, I was at SA this morning after, grabbing coffee. All their stores are still swipe only.
The funniest thing to me is Target made a push for chip cards in like 2000,
Yeah.
and nobody else had bought in. It was too expensive for them to do it by themselves, so they gave up, and then they got breached.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's kind of leading it.
Yeah, that got everybody's attention.
Yeah.
These are other forms of smart cards. So this one is the common access card. So if you're military, Department of Defense would have these cards in it. It's basically one card with like everything on it, right? It's got the integrated circuit. It's got your pay rank. I mean, it's got They use it for authentication. They use it for two-factor, digitally signing documents, gaining access to rooms, I mean, all kinds of stuff. What makes the common access card protected somewhat against duplication is it's encrypted, so it's got digital signature associated with it. It's got a certificate associated with it because it's using DoD's PKI. Somebody here? What happened? Who? Is it the drone?
Sounds like a drone.
Do we have a drone?
Cars. Mercy.
I tell you, work with a bunch of clowns around here. So that's an example. And it also has the magnetic stripe. So, magnetic stripe, that's what we're using in our credit cards is if the integrated circuit doesn't work, I can still use the swipe, so it's kind of a backup. Tailgating, piggybacking, those aren't the right kind of piggybackings. or tailgating. That's not the tailgating we're talking about. But it's when somebody who's not authorized follows in behind somebody who is authorized. The rule of, so when you think about it, right, we have a key card access on the door, right? There's a reason why that key card access is on the door. One is, to prevent access. Another one is accountability. You want to, in this office, it's different because we kind of know who's here and who's not here. But in a larger office, it's important to know who's coming and going, right? So a lot of times you'll see that it's a badge in regardless of whether somebody's holding a door open for me or not. That's the instruction that's been given. And one way that people have really enforced this is if you don't badge in, you don't get paid, right? We're going to tie it to the payroll system. So you do stuff like that and people badge in real quick. They like forget once or twice. But that's one way to prevent, to help prevent piggybacking. Yeah, it's just really easy to get into buildings this way. Man traps and turnstiles. So we talked about what a man trap is. Turnstiles, there's different types of turnstiles. You go downtown, they'll have the ones that sense, right? It's got a line of sight between, I can't remember we're going to get to it too in a minute. It's like your garage door opener. It works kind of the same way.
The eyes.
Yeah, but you break the beam, and so you have to badge before you can break the beam. Right? That's one type of turnstile, but you can hop over that one. There's also ones where you badge in and it opens a little door so you can go through. So those are limited in their applicability, but then you've also got turnstiles that are like the metal ones that have the teeth that, it turns and the teeth, right? That one's pretty hard to defeat, especially if it's, slab to slab, we call it, like from roof, ceiling to floor. So different kinds of turnstiles, and the purpose is, if I badge, it should only open one time. If it opens more than once, the system's broken, but nobody else can get through that. Right? Same purpose with man traps. So man traps, these are both protections against piggybacking. Man trap, first door must close and lock before the second door is open. We've covered that. Each door typically requires a separate form of authentication. We talked about those three forms. We're going to talk about them again. Something I know, something I have, something I am. Those are the three forms. Turnstile designed to one person per authentication rule. Floor-to-ceiling turnstiles, interlocking blades, those metal ones. Both man traps and turnstiles must be designed to allow safe egress. That's an important piece, right? Because the human safety thing comes into play. Everything should fail open, right? So the fire alarm goes off, doors should fail open, right? Or there's no authentication out. But I like badge out of data centers. I like badge in, badge out. So I would rather have it be secured out until the alarm goes off, which then deactivates the badge out. You know what I'm saying? Right. So no system should require authentication for egress during emergencies. Point during emergencies. I like authentication out. I like badge out. Data centers, highly secured, places. So contraband checks. Anybody ever been to like UPS before? I did an assessment of UPS once. Like the UPS, where they do the, what do they call that? The depot or the warehouse processing? Yeah. When you go in and out of there, they do contraband checks because they don't want people stealing stuff, when you leave. And so there's a guard check and everybody has to walk through that guard check, all the drivers, all the helpers, and the guard looks through all of your belongings. That's just a contraband check. You can do contraband checks every time you go on an airplane, right? The contraband check is take your stuff, take your clothes off, and walk through the thing. I mean, it's crazy what they make you do. No, but that's all contraband check. They're looking for stuff that you shouldn't be bringing into, or in the case of UPS, bringing out of facilities.
They do at Costco.
They do that at Costco too?
You gotta give them the receipt.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure that something's in the cart.
Good point. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. At Costco. Yep. Best Buy, they do that. Check your receipt, look through your bag, make sure yeah. Were you gonna say something? Heard you breathe? Like
No, I'm not holding my tongue.
all right then. It's gonna look funny.
I'm gonna fight it.
So motion detectors and other perimeter. So we've got some motion detectors in here. Those are motion detectors, I believe. You never can tell for sure because they'll look different, right? They all have different shapes to them. So a lot of times you have to ask. There's nothing embarrassing when you're doing an assessment about what the hell's that? Because if they don't know, well, then that tells you something too. Right?
Most of the time it's, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. A lot.
But if they do tell you, you're like, oh, cool. So that's what that looks like. Because they look different. Alarm systems, there's no standard way that a motion detector looks. But these are the different kinds. So ultrasonic and microwave, they use bouncing, right? So they bounce off of objects, and that's how they detect motion. So last time I sent a signal to that, it took 0.01 milliseconds or 0.05 milliseconds. And now I just got a signal back in 0.01. Something moved here. Something is, changed that. That's how ultrasonic and microwaves work. Doppler radar, wave of energy sent out, echo is returned back. There's just, they're active. So active and passive, difference between active and passive is an active does something, a passive just sits there and waits for something. So these are both active alarms, ultrasonic and microwave. You'll have to know that. Photoelectric, that's the word I was looking for, the photoelectric sensor, which is essentially, you usually have one that's sending a light or I guess it's sort of light. It's an electric signal. Electric garage door, yep, that's exactly one, electric garage door. You ever had one of those get off and try to realign it? What is such a pain in the butt. But how it works is if something breaks that beam, it's an indication that something moved. Those work. Also infrared sensors. So infrared sensors are passive sensors, and they just sit. They detect heat changes. So they just sit and wait, essentially, and then there's a heat change. So those are easy to bypass if I only have, an infrared sensor. You just maintain, maintain the same heat or, anyway. Other ways to get through motion sensors. So one of the things we don't like about motion sensors sometimes the doors will deactivate. You ever see those things in the ceiling? And when you get close to it, it automatically opens the door or it automatically unlocks the door. You've seen those? You see them in some offices, hospitals, you'll see them. Those are usually pretty easy to bypass because it's on the safe side of the door that thing is happening. So I'm the one that's supposed to be being kept out. You can take a plastic bag on a coat hanger and just stick it under the door and wave it around. And that'll usually deactivate that. So we don't like stuff like that. These are other detectors. So those things right there, those are contact. So you'll see them on doors, that are alarmed. It's the signal, the circuit is going through those contacts. And when those contacts break, that's an indication that the door has been opened. Different types of contacts. You got the one on the left, which is the two kind of, I don't know what shape that is, rectangular things, right? Those are more common on windows. These are the most common on doors. It's just plugs that go into the doors, and one into the door jamb and one into the door. And then, and you can use, now the doors can have different kinds of alarms associated with these connections too. I can have an intrusion detection alarm. So it detected when that door was open unauthorized. I also want to know if that door didn't get shut. Right? So I would also want door ajar alarms is what we call those. Cool. Ooh, look at that. That's an alarm system. So one of the things we don't like about alarm systems like these is people share the codes, right? So we always ask, does everybody have their own unique code? If not, then that's an issue.
Like
with
the
a lot of
ones that
these.
tie into the RFID badges.
Yeah, if it ties
You
into the
don't have
badging
to
system, then it's
remember-
really
You've
easy.
got a generic code, but you have to hit your badge.
Right, or,
Those are much better.
yeah, those are nice, and they're nice when they're zoned, right? So when I badge into a door that's gonna open me into a zone, it disabled the alarm for that zone.
It just, yeah, and then you can restrict who can get access to what.
Yeah, those are much nicer. Not testable, just things that we care about. Doors and windows, the weakest link in the chain. Yeah, obviously, it's easier to go through a door than a door than it is to go through a wall. Usually, especially a brick wall, it's easier to go through a window than it is a brick wall. So the weakest link in the chain, that's where we focus. So on first floor, you like to have glass break sensors in certain places. If your suite is on the 38th floor, a glass break sensor doesn't do you much good. A lot of common sense here. Door hinges should face inward, otherwise we can pop the pin, right, and remove the door and get in. That's a serious design flaw. It's rare to find it. If you do have door hinges that are on the outside, there are door hinges that are protected against. There's secure door hinges that are protected against popping the hinge. So if you can't design it any other way, that this door has to open, out.
We just did one with that. And it's built, and they're welded.
Yeah.
So you'd have to cut the hinge off. You can't pop it in.
Yeah. So door hinges should face inward, otherwise be protected. Yes, internal motion sensors should never include mail slots, and that's because I can stick something through it and jiggle it and open the door. So mail slots and under doors. Externally facing emergency doors should be marked for emergency use only and be equipped with panic bars. The panic bar should trigger an alarm. We have those. They don't alarm. So I've walked through those before in this building. So you could ding us on that. Glass windows are structurally weak. I don't know, just normal like sheet glass windows aren't really used anywhere anymore in any construction. They're usually tempered glass or shadow resistant glass, some other glass derivative, or they're plexiglass. I remember the first time I tried to break a plexiglass window, I took a hammer. I didn't know it was plexiglass, and I was like, "Bam!" That son of a bit. It was crazy. Try that sometime with plexiglass. That scared the crap out of me. Thankfully, I wasn't going like this.
The Homer Simpson with the camera.
Oh yeah. So alternatives, glass, polycarbonate, Lexan, acrylic, plexiglass, it's all good stuff. Yeah, that's enough about windows. Walls, floors, and ceilings. Yeah. Walls, we don't like data centers on exterior walls typically. We like them on interior walls. We don't like windows on data centers. We like data centers to have walls that go from ceiling to floor. Walls need to be fire rated. I think it depends on where you're at, what the code is, but in general, withstand a fire for a minimum of 1 hour. Those are a lot of the things about data centers. Floors, if you have a raised floor in the data center, which is usually a good idea because that's where I'm running a lot of the cabling and things like that, that raised floor doesn't extend beyond the door. So if I went under the floor, I would also get under the door, So walls around any secure perimeter data center should be slab to slab, so I shouldn't be able to just crawl over. Most of our walls here are that way, so if you pop the ceiling tile, you can see, does this go from all the way up to the roof or not? If it doesn't, then somebody like Matt Finlay, who's our ninja, he just scale the wall and hop over, and then unlock the door so the rest of us bigger guys can get in.
Yeah. And it is something like that too.
It is something.
Yeah. So that's when we pop the tiles.
Yeah. I mean, what's the sense in doing a lot of the other, controls you spent potentially millions of dollars on if you had an oversight like
So
that?
I would say, you may cover this later, but I remember things about what would be the best location for a data center.
Yeah, that's coming.
Is that coming?
Oh, yeah.
I'll hold it then.
That's fun stuff.
That
Too.
reminded me of this. Reminded me of that.
Yeah. Do I have to get going? Yeah, I suppose I should move on
All right.
faster. All right, let's get through the stuff. So guards are they're social engineer targets, and guards are bypassable. they're a dynamic control. In most cases, they're a deterrent control. And then they become a detective control or maybe a preventative control. And then if something bad goes on, then they become a corrective control. So what they are changes. Pseudo guards are called the unarmed guards. I don't mess with guards with guns. So the wheel guards, guards orders should be complete and clear. They need to be well trained on what to look for. Some guards are, that's the rent-a-cops that are getting paid $6.50. So I don't know what minimum wage is now, but they're not getting paid much beyond that. And they're slightly a deterrent control, but they're so easily bypassed. So you take that, all these things you take into, what am I trying to protect? Put that into context. Sometimes I have nothing to protect. I just don't care, right? The controls are a lot different than I have a data center in here with 14 million medical records. That's a different story, right? So everything has to be played in based on risk. The guards are guards. Dogs, we don't see a lot of dogs anymore. I think they're really cool because of legal liability. Your dog kills somebody, people get mad about that. But it's a good deterrent and detective control. I don't know, I haven't run into dogs anymore. What you'll see sometimes now is you'll see a perimeter fence, you'll see dogs, and then you'll see an interior control. So they guard that middle area, right? So I have to bypass the control, so that also keeps the dogs in check. It's usually an in-between thing, but you don't see much anymore. Other things that aren't in the exam, which I think are really important, roof hatches, especially in single floor facilities. Roof hatches are an easy way to get into a building without having to get all bam like that, right? That's not the objective, to prevent this guy from getting in but don't leave these unlocked. Check them, that's an easy entry point. We just got on the roof here by using my truck and a ladder.
7-foot ladder, yeah.
And everybody was laughing, but meanwhile, we're stealing everything. You guys thought we were up there to get a drone. Also skylights, nice open concepts sometimes.
And it's surprising how many times you go and check the roof access and it's
Wide open.
It's open.
Yeah.
Right? They don't even have a padlock would be great, but they've got handles to lock it.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
And it's always in the data center or right next to it.
Right. Yeah. And it's more important on a 1-floor facility than it is on a 40-floor facility, because how the heck am I going to get up to 40 floors to get in? Yeah, I'm going to need him for that. So site selection, design, configuration. So choosing where you're going to build a facility, this is where it's got to start. If you choose the wrong location, potentially for a facility, you're stuck with that location. We get asked that a lot, because when we're doing assessments, one of the things we take into account is the crime rate for the area in which you've built your facility, right? And what I always get is, well, there's nothing I can do about that. True. Doesn't mean the risk isn't there. The risk is still there. And yeah, you can't do anything about it, but so choosing the right site, if it's a data center that goes in a different kind of location, then, so we break them down into 4 general categories. It's primary data center, secondary data center, primarily client assets, and no significant assets. Just break them into those categories, and then based on those categories, these controls, have more weight. So wherever you're using, greenfield is the process of choosing where to build a data center or build something. It's an undeveloped plot of land. So neighbors are important too, right? So when you're choosing a site facility, and this may not specifically be on the test, this is a picture of where we are. It's important to know who's around us, right? If there's a liquor store across the street, that has an impact on how we're going to design physical security controls. If we have an airport runway ends, facing here, that's going to change things. So knowing what's around you is important. Knowing who your neighbors are without being too nosy. If we got Data Solutions International, they seem pretty innocent. Swartz and Associates, boring. They're not doing anything. No, I'm just totally kidding. But I mean, it's not, it's important to choose take that into account. Topography is also really important. So depending on what I'm trying to protect, can I use the topography of the site for my benefit and protection, right? In some cases, so usually, here's for instance, you see First data center is built into a hill, right? They chose a place where they could build it into a hill. Their primary concern is tornadoes, right? Well, you're sort of underground, so tornadoes aren't going to be that big of a deal. Plus, they wanted everything to come from one attack location, right? So if I've got a hill, I don't have to worry as much about that area than I do, the front. A lot of times, choosing topography, I don't want to put myself in the middle of a forest, right? I can't see any attacks coming. Camera surveillance is very limited. I may want to choose a flat area where I have a good line of sight. I can see things coming. They also know that I can see things coming, which also serves as kind of a deterrent control. So using the topography is important in choosing your site. Highly secure areas, military installations, others will use, so like, what's it, NATO, not NATO, brain. There's military installations that are built into, NORAD, that's what I was thinking of, is built into a mountain.
Did you ever get in the bunker at Thompson West, Thompson Riders? Underneath it? Just attempt there. I never got to, I guess you don't get to tour that part of the facility, but
you don't get to tour first data either.
Withstand like a 747 crash or something.
Everybody says that. I'd like to. How do you know? How do you know unless you've tested it?
I'm testing. Not going to be tested.
Prove it.
Bill too.
Yeah. So topography, utility, reliability. So if I'm running a data center and it's important enough, maybe I need to be set in a place where I've got 2 power feeds from 2 different grids, right? It's that important that that I have that kind of uptime. There's certain areas like New York City, very unreliable power, right? So I would have, other mitigating controls there. So utility reliability is very important. That will lead to using what UPSs I'm going to use, what generators I'm going to use. Yeah.
You just had a 2-hour brownout today.
You had a 2-hour brownout?
That's fun.
That's not cool at all.
Watching the battery runtime go.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
got 2 hours to get this going.
Did you make it?
We did.
Nice.
Luckily, it was a brownout, and so the batteries were slowly going down, but it was not going to get a charge.
Yeah.
And so I could have gotten there in 3 or 4 hours. My 2-hour run.
Well, that's pretty good.
That was.
Yeah. Do you have a generator too? Okay. So that's it.
That's a good reason to get one now, right?
Yeah. One of the common questions we always ask is, how long can you run on your UPSs, at full load? And that's going to give us an indication of, with the other stuff that we've asked on whether you should kind of have a generator, and that's a common question. So crime rates, this, local crime rates, big factor in site selection, right? This place looks a lot different if we're in South Minneapolis, on Lake Street. So what, and safety issues all come into play. It's not that I wouldn't choose the site necessarily, but I need to have the proper controls in place. This is what we use for, trying to assess the criticality or, the crime rate in the area. We use Neighborhood Scout. It's a real easy, it does cost money, but that's the tool that we typically use. They're pulling FBI data for a lot of this, but they give me an easy number. I can quantify a 65 without having to dig through spreadsheets of, stuff. It gives me data there. So this is actually here, this place right here. So Minnetonka, you think it's really safe, right? This has got to be 100 on a scale of 0 to 100. It's actually 65 here. 76 for violent crimes. So how many? No murders. There's been some rapes. Not cool. Yeah, and other stuff like that. So we're using this kind of data to help us determine, the physical security controls that should be in place. Site design configuration. So a poor site design can't compensate for poor site selection. We get that all the time. Well, I can't do anything about the crime rate. Can't. So you can only take it so far with the controls I'm going to put in place. The threats are so high potentially in that area that you just can't bring risk down enough. So site design cannot compensate for poor site selection. Data centers, we don't want a data center that says with a big blinking light that says data center, right? We typically don't like, depending on the type of data center and where it is, we typically don't want data centers with their generators outside or their chillers, right? For HVAC, we don't want those outside because those are all indications that there's a data center there. Data centers are really easy to pick out, from the crowd. So site marking is important. We don't want data centers externally marked. I don't even want server rooms with server room on the door inside. I mean, you just don't even advertise it. So attention avoiding details such as muted sign design. If you have guards, somehow try to not make them, you can't hide them, but, try to design it in a way that it doesn't look like you have a really super high facility here, high security facility. The Netflix DVD, that's they put their warehouses just in normal places and you wouldn't even know they were there. A lot of data centers are like that.
Big colos.
Yeah, a lot of big colos. They just built a huge data center out my way in Chaska. And they did it. I mean, you could totally tell. I mean, it's so obvious it's a data center. It's like, man, seriously, you guys just built that too.
First one I went into, when I was in operations, we had a contract with them. It was my first trip. And I did kick was, am I in the right spot? Because it's like, yeah, it's just big warehouses, big buildings like this. You can't tell anything.
Yeah,
you walk in, it's just a nondescript lobby.
Yeah, that's the way you want it.
Yeah, really good.
So shared tenancy, adjacent buildings is another big risk, not just neighbors in the surrounding area, but if I'm in a shared, like this is a shared facility, there's not a neighbor here right now in the next suite over, but there will be. I'm we're very interested in who that neighbor is going to be. And
so we can come through the roof.
Well, so we can see if they'll let us run the go-karts over there. But it's not uncommon to compromise the vulnerabilities of your neighbor. They don't take physical security as seriously as you do, and then jump the wall, go through the wall, do something else. There's a lot of stories of that kind of thing happening. So take that into account. The physical controls of your neighbors if you're in an office building and such. Shared demarc is another big area of weakness and risk. Most of the buildings that you go to downtown have a shared demarc. When you're doing an assessment, we usually ask, where's your demarc? So we can go down and see it. And we want to see, is there any restriction between where your circuits are coming in and, everybody else's circuits, or is it just, willy-nilly? And they're less willy-nilly, but that's an important concern. It's very easy to tap into a network there and go undetected. System defenses, so things that we can do to make these things better beyond just the controls themselves. These are more administrative controls. So asset tracking, I always break down assets into 3 types: physical, software, and data. This is primarily around physical assets, so asset tagging, serial numbers, things like that. Those are good controls, defenses to have, and a defense in-depth strategy. So let's say you got in, you got through this, you got through that, you got through this, and now you're sitting in front of my computer. Asset tracking, would I know that you stole my computer? Would I know that you stole a computer that's sitting over here in the corner that I'm not using anymore? Would you know any of those things? Asset track is important. Port controls are big if you have a lot of visitors specifically that come into the facility, and you're in because visitors come and go. You have a waiting area with data ports. Let's to stop them from plugging into your data ports, or you put them into a conference room, and you may even have unescorted visitors are not permitted as part of your policy, except for in data centers. Well, they come and sit in the data center and they've got access. So port controls are kind of important on the switches. So computers may contain multiple ports. That's another thing too, USB drop devices. This used to be kind of, one of the challenges was getting a USB device plugged into something without anybody knowing it. And then that USB device is whatever we programmed it to do. So having USB ports disabled, we all do that, right? Probably not, I'm guessing. You do, because you're good.
But no, I got in trouble.
Are you in trouble? Did you?
The examiners came in. This was years ago.
Right. Yeah. So disabling those ports that aren't being used, physically disabled. In some government agencies, they put super glue in the ports, so you can't use them even if you wanted to.
Overkill.
It's the government.
Yeah.
Drive and tape encryption. So let's say you did steal, removable media. You did steal a laptop. If it's encrypted, maybe it's not as big of a deal. In some cases, I have a safe harbor depending on who I'm dealing with. Safe harbor meaning I'm not going to be non-compliant and face a lot of fines from some regulation. So drive and tape encryption, protect data at rest. One of the few controls to protect something that has been stolen. Mobile devices, whole disk encryption, all good stuff. And then that last one, many breach notification laws do have exclusions. That's the safe harbor stuff. Media storage and transportation. So data that is being taken off-site should have, strict controls around that. It shouldn't be just taken home with, Johnny when he goes home at night. There should be better control around and accountability. This should be fully auditable. So media storage and transportation sites using backup media should follow strict procedures for rotating media off-site. Always use bonded and insured companies for off-site media storage. You need to store the media far enough away. The reason why I'm storing that media off-site is if something destroyed this site, then I'd still have my data. But if I'm storing it across the street and a tornado hits this site and that site, then I kind of defeated the purpose. So usually we want to site it far enough away that the disaster that occurs here wouldn't affect the other site, right? And it varies. There's no rule of thumb. It has to be 9 miles or 10 miles. Some people will cite something like that, but it really depends on the location. If you're talking like New Orleans, right, that's probably outweighs more, right? Than here, right? A tornado is going to hit here. Okay, 5 miles, maybe 9 miles, but a place where a hurricane is going to hit, maybe that's 50 miles, maybe it's 100 miles. You know what I mean? It kind of depends. So there's no set number of miles. You still want to make sure that it's not going to be taken out by the same disaster. Cool. Media cleaning, destruction. We talked a little bit about this. Media cleaning, meaning the sanitization of the data, shredding of the data. So all forms of media should be securely cleaned or destroyed before disposal. The proper way, if you want to follow the proper way, is to wipe them, put them into secure storage until they're destroyed. So they're even secured, physically secured, after they've been wiped, right? As just another defense in depth strategy. So cleaned or destroyed before disposal. Physical data, yep, talked about all that stuff already before. Dumpster diving, never done that before. You guys got the story. You guys know that's crap. All cleaning and destruction, formal policy. We like policies. Policies, the reason why we like policies isn't because we just like making everything hard for everybody, but we know that if you write it down, you're more likely to do it. So policies are important. Formalizing this process is important. Environmental controls. So safe environment, personal equipment, safety. Safety is always going to be number one. Power, HVAC, and fire safety. Those are the environmental controls we're going to talk about primarily. Electricity. Electricity is the number one, most likely thing to fail in any operation. So, there's going to be focus on that on the exam. Types of faults. So memorize this slide. I even put important on it. Right. This is an important slide. So you had a brownout before. What is a brownout? Prolonged low voltage. You didn't have a power outage. You had a fluctuation, of low voltage. So that's why he didn't drain his UPSs and put them out in an hour, 2 hours versus, he was able to sustain operations. So blackout, loss of power, brownout, prolonged low voltage. Short loss of power is a fault, a prolonged high voltage, surge, spike, temporary high voltage, and a sag, temporary low voltage. Then you just got outage, which is easy. It's just outage, right? So you'll need to memorize this. In real life, we don't use this all that much. I don't, but for the test, you'll need to memorize this slide for sure. It's hard to read, but let's just talking about surge protectors under uninterruptible power supplies or UPSs and generators. So surge protectors, electrical surges, right? That short burst of power is what surge protectors, typically help you from. Power spikes or surges. Uninterruptible power supplies provide clean power, so they take care of those short brownouts, spikes. They take care of they normalize the power, make it clean power, but then they also provide, some amount of time for the outage, right? So you want that to be at least as long as it takes for the generator to kick on, right? Or for you to securely transfer over to something else or power down the system. So UPS has kind of played that middleman role. Generators are, as long as you got fuel, that thing will keep running, right? There's different types of generators. There's diesel generators, which I think are still the most common. You've got natural gas generators, which you can go get a Generac at Home Depot. Same kind of thing. It just hooks up to your natural gas line, and as long as you keep having natural gas, you'll keep having power to that. So we'll prolonged power outages. Run as long as power is available. Sufficient fuel should be stored on site. You see the belly tanks on those bigger generators. You've seen a diesel generator before? They look like they're standing off the ground. What they're actually standing on top of is their belly tank. That tank is full of diesel fuel and a diesel generator. So it's not, asking how many, gallons do you have on site and how long will that allow you to run is important, because I also want to have a fuel contract in place, right?
When's the last time you tested it?
Oh, testing.
Yeah, just when we had a power outage last. Yeah, that's not the time to test.
No. Usually the rule of thumb is you follow the manufacturer's specs on those. Usually it's a half, 30 days.
Yeah.
And it's also important, there's different types of transfer switches too, right? There's manual transfer switches and automatic transfer switches. Almost all of them now are automatic transfer switches. It means I don't have to go and run to the utility room and switch the power over from, the power feed to the generator. Now everything's an automatic transfer. Most of them. But, if you're going someplace, it's good to know what kind of thing do I have going on here. It sucks when you do have the power outage. Think, no problem, we got a generator. And I'll say, what? Generator's running. Nobody switched it. So refueling generators placed on areas where flood otherwise impacted by having those bollards around generators is super important. Those are expensive things. Tested and serviced regularly. There's just some literature. You don't have to memorize that, but it's just good, important information from Cummings, who makes a lot of these things. Yep. Generators, EMI. So EMI, electromagnetic interference, can cause issues. Here it's talking about crosstalk. So if I don't have proper shielding on communications wires and I lay those wires across each other, then I get what's called crosstalk. You used to get them on phones a lot. Do you remember when you would talk on the phone and you'd hear somebody else's conversation? What the hell? That's crosstalk, right? Somewhere the wires were run close enough that you were hearing each other's conversations. That's an example of crosstalk. One of the hardest things I've ever had to troubleshoot in my entire life was a network cable that was run over a fluorescent light in the women's bathroom. Right, and so because what would happen, or the fan, it was either the fan or the light, I can't remember. I think it was both. But what would happen was, this was an old token ring network. Do you remember token ring? Do you guys know what token ring is? Right? So they weren't very stable to begin with. It was, spotty at best. But, 5-6 times a day, the network would go down. You'd be like, what in the hell? We'd switched out multi-station access units. That was the MAU.
Yeah.
You remember those things? You'd switch that out. We checked cabling everywhere. What the heck? We couldn't associate with any kind of timing thing, and came to find out finally that it was every time somebody would go into the bathroom and turn that light on or the fan on, it would stop the network. So that's another example of EMI. When we go into data centers, we do not want cables running over fluorescent lights, right? That'll be bad. HVAC. So HVAC's important. We need to provide temperature, humidity are the two primary things with HVAC that were important for the exam. Air quality is also important in real life. But so keep the air at a reasonable temperature and humidity. We'll get tested on. What if it's too dry? If it's too dry, then that's static, right? If it's too wet, it's corrosion. So remember that, right? Dry, static, wet, corrosion. They should operate in a closed loop. Now, there's all kinds of different designs now in data centers. where they're not closed loop, where they're using green technologies, where they're actually taking outside air and treating it and all that kind of other stuff. For the exam, none of that stuff matters. For this is what matters for the test. Operate in a closed loop, that means it's circulating, it's like in your car when you push that recirculation button, the button that's keeping all the air inside, you're not bringing in new air. Same thing with the data center. So positive pressure and drains, that means if there is a leak or something bad happens, it should push out, right? Rather than puddle, or rather, certainly not negative pressure where we're dragging stuff in to the environment. So the positive pressure pushes it out. Anybody remember the Metrodome, right? You walk out of the Metrodome, that's positive pressure, man. That was sweet. Same concept though. It's pushing air out, right? That positive pressure. So all HVAC units should employ positive pressure and drainage. Air and water should be expelled from the building rather than brought into the building. All that stuff is really good. So one of the things you get asked a lot, is what temperature should my data center be? So I figured I'd find some guidance. So I actually, off the top of my head, I don't know, 70-ish sounds good to me. Well, this is their highs and lows, right? So some big names in there, like Dell says 70 to 80, IBM 64 to 80.6. Scientist people, they get all accurate. So if you're interested in that, that's not testable. It's just for your information. Humidity level should be at 40 to 55%. And I should get alarmed if things go outside of these ranges, right? Something's happening and it's not as big a deal today as it used to be because equipment's much more resilient than it was not that long ago. We used to have static. You guys ever had those? Yeah, and the static, anti-static pads and all that stuff. Nowadays, I get shocked every time I touch anything. It doesn't matter. Everything works just fine. But it's not probably optimal. So that's set point. Anything goes outside of the set point, you should get an alert. 68 to 77, 40 to 55%. Humidity. Lots more to memorize. So static and corrosion, we're all cool on that, right? Static things are too dry. That's when I see static electricity. When things are too wet, I'm going to get corrosion. Both of them wear out computer equipment. Static can shock the equipment and actually make it, you can shock it off, right? You can destroy it. Corrosion usually happens more over time. Airborne contaminants are important. VESDA units, VESDA still, very early smoke detection apparatus is also used for, I don't think that's testable, but you ever seen those orange tubes in data centers? That's a VESDA apparatus. And it's testing for contaminants in the air.
Spray the fog into it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So dust, common problem. That dust buildup. Good data centers, they don't let you bring cardboard into the data center. They don't unpack their servers in the data center. They unpack them in a staging area. They, it's kind of cleaned up and then it's brought into the server room because the server room is meant to, or the data center is meant to be a pristine environment, right? For these reasons. It's cheaper to cool, it's cheaper to less outages, all kinds of things with airborne contaminants. Moving parts are really, fans are the biggest moving part in kind of data centers. Most data centers, they're really susceptible to build up and outage from this. Post-it notes, yeah. Heat, flame, and smoke detectors. So different types. Those are the three methods for detecting fire. It's either going to be heat, it's going to be flame, or it's going to be smoke, right? And this is pretty easy to relate to. Like heat, it would just be a temperature sensor. Some spike in temperature that exceeds some number. So maybe it's more than 10 degrees in 1 hour. That's going to trigger an alarm that, maybe we've got a fire. The flame one uses photoelectric. So it's like I see a flickering light intensity, that's a flame detector. And then the smoke detectors will have a couple different kinds. Audible alarm, flashing lights. Can't forget about the people that can't maybe hear, right? They need to be able to see that something bad is happening so they know what to do. Heat detectors, we've covered that. So smoke detectors, two different kinds, ionization and photoelectric. Ionization, those are the kinds I think that you have at your house. There's a radioactive source, and when there's a change in the charge that's why they wear out too. They have like a shelf life of like 5 years, so you have to replace them or something. I don't know. So it's when you change, whenever it goes beep and I change the battery, it still keeps beeping. That means it's time to replace them out.
It's supposed to be radioactive. It's a half-life, but.
Yeah. Yeah. Photoelectric sensors, we're kind of the same way, but LED, small charge when receiving light. Flame detectors notice the light of the fire. Physical security training and awareness, really important. You know, having a safety warden, having a meeting warden, having formal procedures on how to evacuate the building if there's an emergency. It's all very important. Evacuation routes, you see them in larger buildings. Typically, they're posted where the stairwells are, you know, on how to get out of the building. All very important. And by code, it's code in a lot of places like Minneapolis. You can't have a building it exceeds a certain number of floors without having those posted. And they'll help you design all this stuff too, like the fire warden will help you design all of this. So if you don't know how to do it, just call them. But all really important, evacuation rules and procedures, making sure that everybody can be accounted for. That's also another reason why I like badge in, forcing badge in. If I see somebody that badged in and they're not accounted for, like especially in a badge in, badge out, I guess it's more important. But if they're not accounted for, then maybe they're still, you know, we need to take a roll when we get to the evacuation meeting location. So safety warden, meeting point leader, those are two different. The safety warden kind of coordinates everything. The meeting point leader kind of does that. Okay, we're here, let's coordinate, you know, let's do a roll count for everybody and all that stuff. Elevator shouldn't be using a fire, right? Newsflash. Okay, good. Right, different fire types, suppression types. This is really going to be really important. This is also memorization, A, B, C, D, and K. A is common combustibles. It's like paper, wood, you know, those are common combustibles. B are liquids, so oil, gas, not gas. Well, oh yeah. He's going to share a good way to remember it. Diesel fuel is a liquid. You treat it differently, right? I don't spray water on liquid fires, right? You were taught that, you know, kitchen fire with oil. Don't go run and get water on it. It's just going to make it spread more. So there's different ways to treat these. And this is a great graph, whatever this table to memorize, because you will be asked the classification of the fire and the type of extinguisher that you would use, you know, what would put it out. So C is electrical fires and their suppression agents. And then D is metals. Metal fires are really, really cool. You ever seen a metal fire, like magnesium? It's pretty bad, pretty cool. I was gonna say a bad word, it's pretty cool. I have some extinguishers up here. I have a halon extinguisher and I have two ABC extinguishers, right? They wouldn't work on metal, but we don't really have metal here to worry about, you know. So I'll show you, you can see those later. And you can see where they're, you ever looked at fire extinguishers? Every one of them has what they're used for. So on this one here, this is right here, A, B, C.
It's not a camera, so that I can see it on that.
See, A, B, C.
That works.
Okay. And then this one's a halon one, which is pretty cool. It's halon. And then this one has a 2, just marked differently. So this one's marked in a different way, A, B, C. So I know what it's used for. You see it there? A, B, C. And this is the halon one, if you want to see it. Halon. Yeah, so memorize this. K is kitchen fires. Like A, B, C, D, K. Here's just
easy way to remember.
Easy way to remember it. Remember this.
A is for ash. Use an ash. Use A. B is for boil. The boils. B. C is for computers. And K is kitchen.
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
The easiest way to remember it. It relates directly to
A, ash. B, boil. C, computer.
And D?
D is, you have to know D is the metals. Right?
D's.
Come on. Doesn't fit the others. Come on. Give me a
D is dag nabbit.
But yeah, you can remember those.
Dag nabbit?
And
What does it stand for?
You know those 4. You know 4 of the 5. Yeah, right.
Right.
So,
Yeah, good point.
but it's just an easy way to remember which one of each puts out.
So types of agents, there's really 4 ways to put out a fire: temperature, reduce the temperature of the fire, reduce the supply of oxygen, reduce the fuel for the fire, or reduce or deal with the chemical reaction of fire. Always consult local fire code. Fire departments are always very helpful, in all of these things. Asking them what extinguishers you should use and put them where and all that stuff, they're more than helpful. All that stuff. So check with them. And that's another thing you'll see on the exam. You'll see a lot of answers that say, ask the expert or ask an expert. That's going to probably be your answer, right? Because everybody knows you can only be an expert in so many things. I would much rather consult with a fire chief on fire stuff than a security expert. You know what I mean? So always ask the expert. Water suppresses fire, lowering the temperature below the kindling point. It's water I would use on type A fires. Safest of all suppressive agents. Important to cut electrical power in extinguishing a fire with water to reduce the risk of electrocution. I don't know what that looks like. We're not going to test that. Soda acid, you remember the old brass ones? You ever seen them? Oh, really? They're like gold colored. They're made completely out of brass. Old fire extinguishers, really old ones. They used soda acid. These ones don't use soda acid now. I think these are all dry powder. So they're not really used much anymore, I don't think. But the old ones, some of you had to pump them. You had to pump the extinguisher. It would be soda acid. Suppress fire by lowering the temperature. Additional suppressive properties beyond plain water creates kind of a foamy thing on it. Yeah, that's soda acid. Dry powder, sodium, such as sodium chloride, lowering the temperature and smothering the fire, starving it of oxygen or fuel. Yeah, primarily on metal fires. Wet chemical, kitchen fires. K, type F in Europe. I don't know if you need to know type F in Europe, but that's what it is. Also common combustibles, type A, potassium acetate. CO2, this kills people. So we don't use CO2. But truly, right? It'll put out the dang fire and also put you out because it starves the air of oxygen, right? I mean, oxygen gone, you dead. So yeah, be careful with CO2. CO2 is usually used in like remote, like yeah, there's like a pump station, out in the middle of South Dakota. There's nobody there. Fire goes, fine, use CO2 to put it out. There's nobody there, but you would never use it in a server room. So yeah.
Halon's bad for your health as well.
It's bad who?
Halon's bad for your health.
Halon is bad for your health. That's true. And it's safe up to like I think 20 or 30% concentration or something. I don't know. It's on the slide too. Was it Halon or was it? No, it's the replacement.
Yeah, you need to know.
10 to 15%. But you don't need to remember that either.
No.
It's just that it won't kill you, by the way. Yeah, Halon is, you can't get it anymore. The Montreal Accord, because it depletes the ozone layer. But it works. It puts fire out. Now you can only use, I think, recycled Halon. So if you have a Halon system, and I don't think you can do that anymore. I don't know. I don't know of any Halon systems that are in existence anymore. Most aircraft use Halon still. Yeah, so they still have to have recycled supply of Halon. So aircraft use them, but you wouldn't see this in a server room. You certainly wouldn't design a building with a Halon fire suppression system. Halon replacements, because it is very good, at putting out fires. FM200 is one of the kind of the most popular. FP13, I guess, is really, I think of all the data centers I've seen, believe it or not, the most common fire suppression agent is water. It's pre-action dry pipe fire suppression is the most common. But you'll see an FM200, you see the red tank somewhere in the data center that's filled with that stuff. And you can see like these have sprinkler heads, right? These are water. The halon system has kind of the brass looking coney looking thing with holes in it. You seen those? No? Okay. You've seen it. You've seen it? Seen those? No, anyway. You don't need to know for the test. It's just if you're looking, you can see
You will
it.
need to know the replacements in the Montreal.
You will need to know the replacements in the Montreal Accord for halon. So countdown timers. So countdown timers give us a chance to get out before we die, which is good. So all gas systems should use a countdown timer before the gas is released. It allows you to get out. It also allows you to stop it. You know, you'll see on data centers, you'll see the off switch for the fire suppression system. You'll also hopefully see an emergency power off switch. You know, usually protected by a flap, not a flap, cover. Those are good things to have in data centers. Water is usually the recommended fire suppression agent. Yep, that's actually the most common. So sprinkler systems, different types of sprinkler systems. This will also be on the test. So a wet pipe system. A wet pipe system has water in the pipes. And all it takes is for the valve to open, right? Like on these, the only thing, well, these are probably pre-action dry pipe systems, which means there's no water in the system yet. There'll be a triggering event, usually an alarm, fire alarm, smoke alarm, something goes off, which will then release water into the pipes. And then you see the bulb on it. This is a red bulb, so it's 155 degrees. At 155 degrees, that bulb will melt and release the water. So it's two actions, pre-action, right? There's two things that happen in this thing here. In a wet pipe system, there's water in the pipe. It only has to melt the bulb if this is that kind of system. We wouldn't use this much in Minnesota because we have freezing pipes in Minnesota, right? And so if there's water in the pipes, we wouldn't use this in garages. We'd use like a dry pipe system or a pre-action dry
And they
pipe
will
system.
ask in a parking garage what would be the best type of
Okay,
system. And
so they will ask this.
I remember we went over that in the class, so we had similar questions to know. You need to know what type of system is appropriate for the scenario.
Yeah. So head opens, water flows. Each head will open independently as the temperature is exceeded, depending on the bulb. These are the bulbs. The most common is the red, 155 degrees. It's getting dang hot for the blue ones. I mean, we're like cooking bacon in here. It's hot. I don't want to be in there. I wouldn't want to be in any of these, but I could probably take the red for a little bit of time, maybe just short period. But anyway, ceiling temperature too, right? So it's not the temperature here, it's the ceiling, it's the temperature at the ceiling. So 155 degrees up there. I don't know what it is down here, but.
Were you tested on the bulbs?
Tested on the bulbs?
You need to know it. I don't remember having a test specifically on it, but if it's on, yeah, you'll want to know.
You want to know. I don't think you'll need to know the temperature levels, but you'll need to know that there are different colored bulbs.
Probably the order, and you can kind of
Maybe memorize the order.
there.
Yeah. So dry pipe, there's no water, right? It's filled with compressed air, but it only takes one thing for it to release, for the water to release and for it to come out. So water is held back by a valve that remains closed as long as there's sufficient air pressure. As soon as the sprinkler head opens, you hear this, and water coming out right after that. So last thing you hear before you get soaked is the pushing the compressed air out. Deluge systems are much larger sprinkler heads, and their purpose is to get as much water on that area as quickly as possible, right? So it's larger pipes, it's larger sprinkler heads. Yeah. No, they're not dry pipes. There's usually water already in it, right? In the pipe, held back by the deluge valve. And the valve is opened by the fire alarm. So you wouldn't see the bulb on a deluge system. They get a lot of water on the thing as fast as possible as a deluge.
Another one for the dry pipe would be like a library or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah. The scenario?
Yeah, scenario for that. Trying to think of
like an art gallery or a library,
yeah,
which one would be the best one, you know? Yeah. And
if you know the systems,
the pre-action would probably be the dry pipe. Pre-action dry pipe would probably be the best one if given the options of the four. Where you'll see dry pipe, I think, come up will be like in areas where there's freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
And that's the number one reason why to use a dry pipe system over a wet pipe.
Because you don't want the water leaking on
You want to,
image books or art.
yeah, you want to have the ability to shut it off,
Yeah.
right? To do something to stop it. So like a pre-action dry pipe, you do have like a malfunction in the system, right? If I throw a football at that and hit it, that will knock the valve open.
Construction guys knock it off with a ladder next door.
Right.
Shut off water to the building.
That happened, didn't it?
Yeah.
So that, you know, that means it also destroys everything that's there, right? So, but in a pre-action dry pipe system, I knock that valve, that nothing's going to happen. I'm going to have to replace it, you know, so you protect against some of that stuff too.
So why is the first dry pipe in reaction?
Right. And they just call it pre-action probably on the
Because you can use
test, but it is,
with any of the three.
right.
When was the time they used the
Deluge? I think just in a spot where you want to get a bunch of water on the system. I mean, a bunch of water as quickly as possible. Maybe it's a fueling station. No, because that'd be water. You don't want to do that. What's that?
Yeah, lumberyard.
Yeah, maybe a wood storage system, you know, place. Yeah, where you just got to get water on it quick.
Offshore oil rig.
Offshore oil rig. Yeah,
They have those type of systems.
but I think they're not using water though, maybe.
Ballard freeze or something.
Yeah.
It's the deluge principles.
Yeah,
Get lots on it.
get lots on it. Yeah, so it'd be a place that's got a pretty high flash point, you know, so like it'll spread really fast. So maybe a paper storage, something like that. So pre-action, two things. Single interlocking system releases water into the pipes when the fire alarm triggers. So that's step one. Step two, water releases when the head opens. And the head could be one of these, you know, reach 155 degrees and the second thing happens. So double interlock systems have compressed air in the pipes. Water will not fill the pipes till both alarms go. Pre-action systems are used in areas such as museums. There you go. Where accidental discharge would be expensive. Double interlock systems are used in cold areas such as freezers to avoid frozen pipes. Easy. Portable fire extinguishers. So they are marked. So it says should be marked. They are. If you've got a compliant fire extinguisher, it will be marked with the types of fires that it can be used on. Should be small enough and operated by any personnel. Those are all pretty small and easy to use. And use the pass system. So pull the pin. They all got pins on them. Aim low. So you aim at the base of the fire. Squeeze and sweep. Yeah, the pass method. That's it.
So
Oh, gosh, I'm late again.
Oh,
I suck
real
at
quick
it.
on deluge. So I'm looking through my notes from when I took the class. My notes from were no dry pipe, wet pipe. If it's not either of those, it would be deluge. So
Okay.
just know what wet pipe would be used for, know what a dry pipe would be used for. If they give you a scenario where it's neither of those makes sense, go to deluge.
Mhm.
So,
All right, so we made it through that. Physical security, any questions? That didn't seem very exciting. Nobody was excited about that one.
I like that one.
I brought props. I brought props.
Yeah, I learned all the gate types and all that stuff. I
think-
like
Extinguishers
that
are
one.
fascinating.
What's that?
I've never seen a halon extinguisher before.
One right there. Careful.
Are you gonna
Hang
recite?
on one second. Can you repeat? So repeat what I told you about the dry pipe, wet pipe. They couldn't hear me very well.
Brad
So you want me
said,
to come over there?
Brad said something.
Thank you. I said, my notes from when I took the test said, know what a wet pipe and dry pipe are and know the scenarios for them. And if if you get a scenario on the test, a question where wet pipe or dry pipe don't make sense, then it would be deluge would probably be the answer. So that was it.
That's fully charged too. The Halon? The Halon? Yeah.
Well, that it's a
You
little
could sell that on the black market. Yourselves a few bucks.
It's the tag date.
You know, I don't know. I'll look at, oh, the expiration on the Halon?
1973.
Looks like 2005.
Yeah, we inherited that one. That was sitting in the back.
And that's in place.
It's been inspected multiple times. And it's not illegal to have helium, it's illegal to
Use it.
produce it.
Yeah,
You can't buy it anymore.
no, don't use it. Certified recycle service.
Right, and there's probably a lot more ozone depletion going on than me using that sprinkler, I'd assume. It was the mass production kind of thing. Questions? No? All right, so we're gonna get technical on Tuesday. We're gonna talk, begin our communication and network security domain, which is pretty cool. We'll talk with, yeah, it'll be fun. For a lot of us who have been in networking, it'll be kind of remedial stuff. It'll be, here's the OSI model, right?
Gotta know it.
Here's TCP IP, here's how to do IP addressing. Here's, we'll touch on subnetting. You don't need to know, but it'll be pretty easy to just get through. All right, that's it. Have a great weekend. Any other questions online?
Nope.
All right, we're good. Take care, guys.